Hey everyone, I am Elizabeth Sherman from Total Health by Elizabeth, and what I am is I'm a health coach. I help folks just be healthier by making changes to their eating and their exercise, sleep management, and stress levels. So it's just after the first of the year, and people are really gung-ho about getting healthier, and I think that is fantastic. So what I want to do is I want to help you be healthier. And so what happens is a lot of people, they find a diet like Whole30 or keto or whatever it is, and they read the book and then they decide that they are going to follow the guidelines in the book to a T. And I just want to tell you that being perfect isn't going to serve you in this situation. I know you want to be perfect, and I know you want this diet to work for you, but consistency trumps perfection every single time. And if you want to be successful, what you need to do is you need to make this diet your own. You need to take what works for you, apply that, and then what doesn't work for you, you need to change it a little bit. And so what I want to talk about are what are called trigger foods and buffer foods, and how these can serve you in your new way of living. Okay, so there are these two categories of foods called trigger foods and buffer foods, and ultimately they're going to be different for each one of you. So your trigger food may be a buffer food for your best friend or your sister or your spouse. Okay, generally, the group of foods that are trigger foods are also kind of the same foods that are the buffer foods. So let me explain that. So foods that tend to be trigger foods for people can be coffee, chocolate, alcohol. So whether it's hard alcohol, wine, or beer, nuts and nut butters, cheese, and those are generally about it. Now, what's interesting though is that as I went through that list, you might have been thinking to yourself, oh yeah, that's a trigger food for me, and that one's not. And so as I mentioned again, they could be different depending on your hormones and your biology and all of that great stuff. So let me talk about what trigger foods and buffer foods are. So trigger foods are foods that will do one of two different things. They are the types of foods that once you start eating them, you cannot get enough of them, and you just completely just go overboard on them. So like nuts, we see them in a bowl and we start eating them. Okay, that's cashews for me. However, I find that almonds are what are called a buffer food. And so I can just have a few of them and not feel like I need to eat everything, especially if those almonds are raw almonds. Raw almonds are just so chewy and they really make you feel like you're eating something. So buffer foods, what they do is by eating a buffer food, it kind of satiates your appetite. It's not necessarily something that's on plan for the diet, but it's something that's not really that bad. Or you can have a little bit of it and feel like you don't have to, eat everything later on. Like gets you off the edge. So again, there are two different types of buffer foods, and I talked about the one, which are buffer foods that once you eat one, then you feel like you have to eat everything. But then there's also buffer foods there's also trigger foods that if you eat that one food, you then start eating everything else. And so what might be something like that is alcohol can be a trigger food like that. So alcohol, once we start drinking alcohol, we kind of lose our inhibitions, and where before we started drinking, we were like, oh, I'm not going to have any bread with dinner. But then once we have a glass of wine or two, then we might decide, oh, it's just one, piece of bread or two pieces or whatever. And then finally, we're eating dessert afterwards as well. So again, we have two different types of trigger foods. Trigger foods that, you just can't stop eating them. But then also trigger foods that will lead to other types of, and I don't want to use the word binge, although it might be, but overeating other foods. Now, the other side, the way to counteract that is generally with buffer foods. So when you are wanting to lose weight, or if you are trying to be healthier, it's really clear to understand which foods affect you and how. Because if you can decide that you are going to have just a little bit of your buffer food, and that's just enough so that you feel that you're being indulgent, but you're not really breaking the bank on your diet, then that's going to keep you more consistent. And again, consistency is what's more important than being perfect. Because perfection, life isn't perfect. We are not perfect. And so to think that we're going to follow this diet perfectly for the rest of our lives just doesn't make any sense. So that's what I have to share with you today. Let me know if you have questions. Put any questions that you have in the comments. Again, I'm a health coach and I want you to be healthier. So if you have any questions for me, I help people do this stuff every single day, and I would love to help you too. So just let me know. And that's about it. Let me know if you have any other questions too, because I love doing Facebook Lives. Bye.